Prime Minister Basdeo Panday spends his first day in office. Mr. Panday responds cautiously as the Jamaat apologizes and pledges allegiance. And the body of a man is discovered in a parked car in Marival. Good evening and welcome to Panorama. Day one in office for Prime Minister Basdeo Panday, and he receives a warm welcome from members of his staff at the financial complex. The Prime Minister promised an open-door policy to staffers and announced that Parliament should be reconvened by November 22nd. Dale Enoch was on hand to capture the arrival of Prime Minister Panday at his Port of Spain offices.
For the first time, Basdeo Panday walked into the financial complex as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Several members of staff gathered to welcome their new boss and cheered his arrival. The Prime Minister was also greeted by senior staff officials and then quickly whisked away to say hello to staffers on the upper 3 floors of the building. While the reception was warm and welcoming in many of the departments, 1 or 2 employees were not as welcoming. In fact, their courtesies were somewhat lukewarm. Nevertheless, Mr. Panday remained optimistic.
A very pleasant experience indeed, and I could feel the goodwill and the sense of warmth among the staff. I have assured them that I'll operate an open-door policy here.
The Prime Minister says he wants to have Parliament reconvened by November 22nd. However, cabinet appointments, he promises, won't take place before full consultation.
As you know, what I want to do is I want to have the widest consultation before I appoint the ministers and cabinet, and even the senators. So that's why I'm going to speak to the business committee, I want to speak to the labor movement and so on.
When asked about the possibility of the country going back to the polls because of his very slim majority in Parliament, Mr. Panday does not see the need.
We will tell the nation that I don't think an election is required at this stage. I don't think it's advisable at this stage. A nation goes into trauma with an election. There's a lot of division in the society, and we shouldn't repeat it so often. So I'm hoping that we would be able to run the country on the basis of consensus. Of course, if that is not possible, then one would have to go back to the polls.
It was only yesterday Mr. Panday's predecessor, Patrick Manning, said goodbye to the very same staff. But as Mr. Panday puts it, things are changing so very fast. Dale Enoch reporting for TTT News.
Well, Prime Minister Panday has responded cautiously to a pledge of support from the Jamaat al-Muslimeen in his efforts at national unity. And in offering its support, the Jamaat has also called on NAR leader A.N.R. Robinson to let bygones be bygones. Mr. Robinson was one of the major victims of the 1990 Jamaat insurrection against his then NAR administration. Errol Pilgrim has more.
Describing it as a symbolic gesture, members of the Jamaat al-Muslimeen removed a sign posted at their Mikurapo compound heralding the anniversary of the July 1990 insurrection. Jamaat leader Yasin Abu Bakr says the gesture is in keeping with the Jamaat's determination to bury the hatchet and to support the call to national unity from the new government. Adopting a contrite position for the first time since his release from prison following the insurrection, Imam Abu Bakr offered these sentiments to those whose relatives lost their lives in 1990.
We are grieved and we are very, very sorry for all the lives that are lost. And we will keep our promise that we made that whatever it is that we can do to assist any of the families whose lives were lost, we keep our pledge and we will do that as soon as we get our money, including Mr. Teague, the policeman who was shot.
But it was with an element of caution that Prime Minister Basdeo Panday responded later to the Jamaat's pledge of support to his new administration.
You must know that we have worked out sort of alliance and arrangement with Mr. Robinson, whereby the government of Trinidad would be run. I therefore can no longer, and I do not believe that I have the right to preempt any decision that that joint group may take, because I'm not alone now anymore. But personally, what I would say that we welcome the commitment of anyone to nation building, in a lawful way, of course. And all who are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago should join in the struggle to make this country a safe, a peaceful and a happy place for all of our peoples. One should not reject that kind of offer, but we would like to know how they think they can play a part in the new dispensation.
At a news conference earlier, Imam Abu Bakr said he wants to assure Mr. Robinson and his family that the time has come to shed the events of the past.
We must join together to assist Mr. Panday in this journey into the future. We stand shoulder to shoulder with you and your team, remembering always that the future of our children are at stake.
On the issue of the $15 million claim against the state for the demolition of its buildings, the Imam says the Jamaat is prepared to accept part payment in bonds. Errol Pilgrim, TTT News.
The Jamaat al-Muslimeen's claim for $15 million in damages is not maintainable. Former Attorney General Keith Sobian says the issue involving the Jamaat and the state has been misrepresented in the past, and he suggests that the new Attorney General take a careful look at the case. The new holder of the office, Kamla Prasad Bissessa, agrees that it requires urgent consideration. Mr. Sobian formally handed over office to Mrs. Bissessa this afternoon, and we'll have details of that later in our newscast. Meanwhile, the Supermarkets Association says it's ready to hold discussions with the new government on matters affecting the food trade and to find solutions to the issue of rising prices on basic food items. In a message of congratulations to Mr. Panday, the association also wants government to review the legislation that prohibits the sale of liquor on Sundays and public holidays. They say that at present, bars and restaurants are allowed to sell liquor on those days, which is in direct contravention of the trade liberalization and the open market economy. In addition, they contend that the prices of over-the-counter and non-prescription drugs could be reduced by up to 15% if existing legislation is changed to allow supermarkets to sell these items. The Public Services Association pledges its support to the Prime Minister and his new government, and the PSA is of the view that the formation of a government under the present conditions requires that the interests of the working people, who make up the majority of the population, must be included in formulating any government of national unity. They anticipate that the new government will make consultation with the majority of society in deciding policy issues a hallmark of its operations. The Chamber of Commerce says the new government inherits a solid economic base on which a sound future can be built. In a release, they say they are ready and willing to participate in and contribute to those policies and measures designed to further the development and prosperity and welfare of the nation. And Prime Minister Panday explains how he intends to govern when Panorama returns.
On me, TNT. Yes, it's me, TNT. And feed the name. Performance again. It's back on the brain. We're rolling again. Call on me anywhere to rev up your engine. Yes, it's me everywhere. Land, sea, and air. Call on me, tough and strong. Come with me, you can't go wrong. Count on me, I'm here for you. That's how much I need you.
Prime Minister Basdeo Panday says he intends to bring a new style of government to Trinidad and Tobago. Rather than government by majority, his will be a government by consensus. The new Prime Minister was speaking with TTT's Errol Pilgrim concerning problems that are likely to arise in Parliament because of the slim majority between government and opposition. He also spoke about a meeting he held earlier with opposition leader Patrick Manning.
any legislation that I think that the new government brings before the House, it should first have a consensus from the entire House. That is to say, from all the parties in the House, including the PNM. Because even if we did have the required constitutional majority, it would be unwise to bring motions before the Parliament to amend the Constitution unless there was the widest possible consensus. After all, we all have to live with the law once it is passed, and there's no point in pushing laws down the throats of people. So that I think we are going to run this government in a new way. It's going to be a government not by majority, but a government by consensus, in that we shall put the matters on the table before they come to the Parliament. We shall have committees of the Parliament that will put matters on the table, have them thoroughly discussed, have a consensus arrived at, so that by the time it reaches the floor of the House, there's no longer the adversarial antagonism that is attendant upon the present system as we know it.
Is there any indication yet, Mr. Prime Minister, that the People's National Movement has heeded your call to join towards this government of national unity?
Oh, I think I can safely say that they have not, because I met earlier today with Mr. Patrick Manning, the leader of the opposition. At around 1 o'clock I met with him, and I told him exactly what I am telling you, that we'd be very happy to have a government of national unity. And he said while he agreed with the concept of national unity, he did not believe that the way I was approaching it was the right way, that is in the Parliament, but that national unity should take place within the parties. And I'm not sure what he meant by that. But that I think it'd be safe to say at this point in time, the PNM, Mr. Manning, has rejected the call for national unity. I did, however, tell him that he having done so, I would feel free now to make a general and specific appeal to all members of Parliament to join in a government of national unity, to make a personal appeal to them. And I also told him that I intended to go throughout the length and breadth of this country espousing my call for national unity, and to hope to convince the population to put enough pressure upon him to concede to our request.
Yes.
And the PNM is supporting the idea of national unity. However, its political leader Patrick Manning says the party disagrees with the UNC and the NAR as to how that unity is to take place. The PNM's General Council met last evening at Balize House. Later, Mr. Manning told reporters that he is willing to meet with Prime Minister Basdeo Panday, but he says the PNM will not be part of a government of national unity as it is being proposed. Nicole Huggins reports.
The General Council of the People's National Movement feels that the political party is the best vehicle for creating national unity. Political leader Patrick Manning says the PNM will work towards national unity within the framework of the party.
The government is saying that the way it is to be done is by bringing all the parties together. When that happens, ladies and gentlemen, and the deliberations take place, as was said this evening, in a group, for one, the arrangement is not transparent, and we believe that it can have the effect of subverting the parliamentary system that we have now. As of now, nobody has been able to answer the question as to who will form the opposition in such circumstances.
But Mr. Manning is not entirely ruling out the possibility that some sort of accommodation could be reached.
If, however, Mr. Panday comes up with some suggestion that we consider feasible, then we are prepared to consider it. But as of now, we do not see that alternative.
Meanwhile, the PNM will be carrying out a post-mortem on its performance in the election. Mr. Manning feels that while his government performed well on the economic front, the benefits were not yet being felt by voters.
It has still not yet produced the results that the average citizen wants. That is to say, it has not been able to create the full employment yet, right? Because that is what the citizens want. The standard of the cost of living is fairly high. It has not been able to achieve that yet. So in other words,
he believes with skillful management, the economy can still achieve these things. Mr. Manning says he has no regrets about calling the election when he did. As for crossing the racial divide, Mr. Manning feels it's something both the PNM and the UNC are working on. but in different ways. Nicole Huggins, TTT News.
And it's time now to take a look at the national weather forecast with meteorologist Emmanuel Mulchan.
Tonight's national weather forecast is brought to you courtesy Penta and MP.
Count on me, TNT. Yes, it's me, TNT. And feed the name. Performance again. It's backbone and brain. We're rolling again. Call on me anywhere to rev up your engine. Yes, it's me everywhere, land, sea and air. Call on me, tough and strong. Come with me, you can't go wrong. Count on me, I'm here for you. That's how much I need you. Count on me, TNT.
Political analyst Lloyd Best says the first horizon of the UNC-NAR government is the Tobago House of Assembly elections. Mr. Best was asked to comment on the political alliance between the United National Congress and the National Alliance for Reconstruction. He spoke with Ellen Lewis Adamson.
Best notes that no change in the Constitution is required to form a national front or unity government. According to him, politicians run a country, not a constitution. Regarding Mr. Panday's call for a unity government, Mr. Best feels that a coalition party should have first been formed before the election. But as the situation now stands, the government may not endure the test of time.
So I would think the government would last at least a year, because the first 3 months that they have need to be devoted to the budget and matters of supply and the finance bill. And thereafter they have to negotiate what precise constitutional changes they wish, or changes they wish in the association between Trinidad and Tobago. And that'll take the best part of a year. And then they'll probably want to go to the polls with the Tobago House of Assembly at the end of 1996. So that it seems to me that there's a compulsion for them to work together for at least a year. And I'm not saying that they may not be able to work much longer than that, or they do not want to work much longer than that, but it's going to be an extremely difficult thing to do, clearly.
With respect to the Ramesh Miraj factor, Mr. Best believes that Mr. Miraj was a liability which the UNC decided to get rid of early.
No, he became an issue in the election. He became a millstone around Mr. Panday's neck, and he had to go. It's very simple. He's an issue, and he's a problem. He's a liability for Mr. Panday. And he had to go. It's very simple, and they did it amicably, sensibly. They said that Panday offered him something and he declined. But politically it's quite clear that he couldn't go. But the country has no sense of politics. They go on and on and on and on, discussing whether Ralph Miraj would be expelled from the PNM. Nobody saw that politically all they had to do was to leave him alone. The country has no political perception. They're all civil servants.
And figuring out how to make good on those campaign promises will be the first order of business for the new UNC-NAR government as it prepares to formulate its first budget. But what's more, says UE economist Dennis Pantin, the government-to-be may soon find that dealing with so-called softer or social issues such as crime and unemployment has a cost in cold, hard cash. Denise Moore spoke with Mr. Pantin about the challenge facing the new government.
UE economist Dennis Pantin says having found itself in office, the Panday administration must now turn its attention to fulfilling some of its campaign promises if it's to secure the confidence of the people. Mr. Pantin notes that chief among the issues raised by Mr. Panday on the elections platform was the question of the debt owed to public servants. And while addressing that matter would clearly incur an economic cost to the country, he notes that so-called non-economic issues such as crime and unemployment will also take their toll.
On no occasion did Mr. Panday articulate in any way what were the numbers involved in terms of what was the estimate, but one would imagine that we're talking about several $100 million there. So if you're going to spend more money, then the question is where you're going to find it from on the revenue side. And there are only one or two ways to find it. You can borrow it domestically, you can borrow it abroad, which is hardly likely, or in fact you can get it from either improve income tax collection or from new taxes. I doubt.
The UE economist says the question of who Mr. Panday appoints as his finance minister will also send definite signals to the populace.
If he puts in someone who has been closely identified with the policies of the prior government or two, then in effect he's saying that we can expect no changes. If he puts in someone else, then maybe. And if he puts in someone who was among one of his financial backers, then he's indicating a quick and very early payback for investments made. So
Mr. Panton points out that in macroeconomic terms, and certainly in the short term, the new government will find itself with very little room in which to maneuver in terms of formulating policy.
Much of the economic agenda for the next 5-10 years is set in a number of agreements signed by the government with the World Bank and the IADB. If Mr. Panday wants to do anything, he would be well advised to publish those documents and to permit a national debate on the implication of those documents. That is, to get some people who could probably digest the reports and come up with some of a collective synthesis of the implications and what is likely to follow from that, and have a national debate. Or
Mr. Panton says if the government is sincere about its program for consultation, much can be done to steer a path that is a unique one and which can be of benefit to the people. But he stresses that getting to that point would also require that the new leadership take the country into its confidence as it charts a course forward. Denise Moore, TTT News.
And congratulations to this country's new government continue to pour in from various interest groups. In a media release, the Employers Consultative Association has pledged to support the UNCNAR government, saying Prime Minister Panday's experience as a politician and Labour leader is a welcome advantage in his new office. Congratulations also come from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Social and Welfare Association. Their message to the new Prime Minister reaffirms the association's commitment to peace, stability and the rule of law. Support also comes from the National Union of Government and Federated Workers, which has pledged support and assistance in maintaining a good employer-employee relationship. The NUGFW also sent special congratulations to ANR Robinson for his role in effecting what it calls a smooth transition in having the new government in place. Well, joining us now is Ashford Jackman, and he has to tell us about some controversy in football, Ashford.
Yes, Debbie, we haven't had that for some time. It had to come. Good evening, everybody, by the way. It all happened at Presentation College in Chaguanas this afternoon. The first of the quarterfinals in the Coca-Cola Big 8 competition. And we'll have the information on that and highlights of yesterday's Intercol final as well.
Ashford will return in a moment.
The finest roti requires Lion baking powder. Lion baking powder, the power behind our good taste traditions.
The Jamaat al-Muslimeen's claims for $15 million in damages is not maintainable. Former Attorney General Keith Sobian says the issue involving the Jamaat and the state has been misrepresented in the past, and he suggests that the new Attorney General take a careful look at the case.
They have a claim of $12 million, which is a claim that we do not feel is a claim that could be maintained. We have had not only the in-house people look at it, we have also had lawyers from outside look at it. In fact, we have also maintained a claim against the Jamaat for the damage to the police headquarters, particularly the Red House, and this was done on the basis of advice from lawyers external to the state.
New Attorney General Kamla Prasad Bissessa agrees that it requires urgent attention, but says she will keep an open mind on the matter. She says she sees no conflict of interest in the matter that the Jamaat's lawyer, Ramesh Lawrence Maraj, is now a member of government.
we would have to have a proper brief. We will have to look at it. It will be a matter on which I would have to be advised as well by those who have been dealing with it within the department, the relevant department. So as I said yesterday and I say again, it would be premature for me to really give you any proper comment, any full comment on that matter. Indeed, it will be the same for any of the pending matters. My mind is open. I have to get proper briefing.
Mr. Sobian formally handed over office to Mrs. Prasad Bisesa this afternoon. Finally this evening, just to recap the top story back at home, it was day number 1 in office for Prime Minister Basdeo Panday, who received a warm welcome from members of his staff at the financial complex. The new Prime Minister promised an open-door policy to staffers and announced that Parliament should be reconvened by November 22nd. And that brings us to the end of Panorama this evening. Thanks for watching. Good night.